All right. There we go. I haven't done one of these lives in a while, and I forgot half of the things that I need to do to make these things function. So here we go. All right, y'all. Welcome to my SIBO masterclass. In today's class, I am going to be going through the basics of SIBO. So SIBO stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. It causes a lot of digestive issues. Oftentimes, distended stomach is a kind of classic symptom of it. A lot of gas. Some people have diarrhea. Some people have constipation. It really runs the gamut. So we'll be diving into kind of the logistics of SIBO, how SIBO develops. And then we'll also talk about kind of the traditional mechanisms for addressing SIBO. So antibiotics are super common, but as a lot of you may know, antibiotics are pretty problematic for the gut microbiome. I am the first one to say that antibiotics have very, very important use for different scenarios. You know, if you have a UTI, an antibiotic is definitely an important route oftentimes. If you have an ear infection, frequently you need an antibiotic. When it comes to gut issues, antibiotics for gut issues can give people relief, sometimes permanent relief, but frequently they end up causing more harm than good to the gut. So we're going to be talking about some alternatives for working with SIBO, addressing SIBO, resolving SIBO for the long term. I see a lot of clients in my practice who are coming to me either with SIBO symptoms or they've already been diagnosed with SIBO. And they may have already gone through a SIBO protocol, but they are still experiencing symptoms and the SIBO has not been resolved. And unfortunately, the statistics for this are quite high. So 45% of people who are diagnosed with SIBO go through oftentimes multiple rounds of various protocols, treatments, etc., and their symptoms continue to return. So what I'm going to talk about today is why that is. Why do these symptoms continue to return? And what is both the short-term but also the long-term strategy for really healing your GI permanently from SIBO, right? So there's a very important component of SIBO protocols that are frequently missing in a lot of the protocols that I see that new clients are coming to me with after seeing another practitioner. And I want to give you some background on why this particular missing piece is so important when addressing SIBO. So SIBO is a scenario in which bacteria are residing in the small intestines being one area of the digestive system. There are bacteria hanging out in the small intestines that are not supposed to be there. These are bacteria that are meant to be living in the colon, okay, which is another area of the digestive system that's further down, okay? The colon is a very diverse, dynamic environment. There's a lot of different types of bacteria in the colon, and that's on purpose. Okay, it's part of how we make vitamins, like vitamin B, for example. All right. The small intestines, on the other hand, though, is not supposed to be a bacteria diverse environment. It's really supposed to be a predominantly sterile space. And the small intestines is where we absorb the majority of our nutrients. So what frequently happens with SIBO is the valve, the sphincter between the colon and the small intestines, can become dysfunctional. It can get propped open with undigested food. And now that sphincter that's supposed to protect the small intestines and really keep that sterile environment is now having overflow from the colon into the small intestines, thereby inhabiting the small intestines with bacteria that are coming from the colon. And over time, what this scenario creates is that these bacteria are inflammatory frequently. And a lot of these bacteria that come into the small intestines are really not supposed to be in the digestive system at all. And we're going to be talking about specifically what some of those species look like, the symptoms that they cause, and also how to get yourself tested so that you know if part of your digestive issues have to do with these species or these bacteria that aren't supposed to be there at all. Okay. And especially aren't supposed to be in the small intestines. So the classic symptom of SIBO is a distended stomach. Okay. And then the other kind of classic symptom is that a lot of times people who have SIBO, they feel really good when they wake up in the morning before they've eaten anything. Okay. And then as the day progresses, their digestive symptoms get worse and worse and worse. Again, frequently distended tummy is one of the issues, but there's gas, there can be constipation, diarrhea. And having SIBO is a very frustrating process. Okay? For one, as I've talked about already, it can be difficult to get rid of. But for two, the symptoms of SIBO are really uncomfortable. And oftentimes what people try to do is figure out, did I eat this thing and this caused the bloating? So I'm going to stop eating that thing. Okay. And then like, oh, that didn't really work. Well, maybe I'll stop eating this thing. Maybe it's dairy. So I'm going to pull that out. And then the symptoms continue to grow in severity. They just can't figure out what's wrong. So it's like a game of whack-a-mole. It's incredibly frustrating. And so what I work on with, frankly, all of my clients, whether they come to me with SIBO or whether they come to me with low testosterone, one of the places that we always want to start as a foundational support for overall health is the gut. Gut health is paramount to every single aspect of your health. And most people have some imbalances in their digestive system. How severe those imbalances are depends from person to person. For people who have SIBO, frequently what we see is when I run a GI map test on them, which is a stool test that really gives us a breakdown of the gut microbiome. Okay, it tells us how many good guys you have, which are probiotics. It tells us what kind of inflammatory species you have present, and it's those inflammatory species that really cause a lot of these issues. Okay. It'll tell us how well you're digesting your fat, how well you're digesting your protein, how well is your pancreas working. Pancreas releases enzymes to help break down carbohydrates. It'll also tell us how your immune system is specific to your gut. And what most people don't realize is that 70 to 80% of your immune system resides in your digestive system. So, for people who have autoimmune issues, working on gut health is so incredibly important. So the GI map gives us this just incredible amount of information. And when it comes to SIBO, this is really, really important because frequently what happens when people get diagnosed with SIBO is usually one of two routes. So the first route is that they're put on an antibiotic, okay, which, as we've talked about, can be problematic in and of itself because it's killing off those good guys in your digestive system. It's those good guys that help to maintain the resiliency of your gut lining. It's those good guys that really help support your immune system. Okay, so we really don't want to kill them off. And then it will also share with us a more dynamic view of what is really driving those SIBO symptoms in the first place. Okay. So when we just go that antibiotic route, we end up missing a lot of kind of the core drivers of where SIBO developed in the first place. So the second route that is frequently taken for addressing SIBO is doing some sort of antimicrobial protocol, which antimicrobials are any different kind of assortment of herbs that are used to help kill off these inflammatory species that could be causing the SIBO. They're highly effective at doing so. However, some of these antimicrobials address different types of inflammatory species. So it's really important to understand what species are actually at play. And again, that's where the GI map is such an important tool to help us really identify what is going on in the gut. And so in that second route, the antimicrobials are brought in, and then frequently some type of dietary, kind of blanket dietary approach. And what I mean by a blanket dietary approach is that there are a lot of different diets out there, right? There's the paleo diet, there's the keto diet. For something like SIBO, oftentimes what's recommended is something called the FODMAP diet. Now, while the FODMAP diet may help to relieve symptoms of SIBO in the short term, once you bring those foods back in again from that FODMAP diet, frequently the symptoms do return. Okay. So again, the two most common routes of addressing SIBO are either route number 1, which is using antibiotics, or route number 2, which is a combination of antimicrobials and kind of a blanket diet approach. Okay. Here is the missing piece. All right. We need to look beyond the SIBO. We need to look beyond that diagnosis and really understand what the root cause of the SIBO is. So let's go back to what we talked about in the beginning. Frequently, that ileocecal valve, okay, that separator, if you will, between the small intestines and the large intestines has become dysfunctional. And frequently, the reason for that is because food is not getting digested properly. There's quite a lot of research out on SIBO in relationship to different medications. So SIBO in relationship to PPIs, for instance. What is a PPI? A PPI is a proton pump inhibitor. Basically, what it does is it reduces the amount of stomach acid in your stomach. What we know about stomach acid is quite incredible. Okay. Every single one of my clients that I work on gut health with, every single one of them, we optimize their stomach acid levels. Okay. It's a core tenet of really getting a person's digestive system back on track. Why is it so important to optimize stomach acid? So let's just go through this briefly. You have chicken for dinner. You chew it up, you swallow it, it goes into your stomach. Immediately what happens there is that your stomach starts to produce stomach acid. Okay. The stomach is a very, very acidic environment, and that's on purpose. So acid helps to kill off bugs that you may have consumed unknowingly in your food. I know that grosses people out, but it's just the reality of things. You know, our food is not sterile. It's on purpose. It's not sterile on purpose, right? So that acid helps to protect us. It's our first line of defense for our immune system. But the other thing that acid does is that it begins the breakdown of food. Okay, it helps to start breaking down protein and carbohydrates and fat. And then the third thing that happens here is really quite remarkable. As your stomach becomes more and more acidic with that stomach acid, hormonal signals are now being sent to the pancreas saying, hey, pancreas, just a heads up, we got some food coming down the pipeline here soon. So I'm going to need you to pump out some enzymes so that we can get this job done. We can get this chicken digested. Or, hey, gallbladder, I need you to release some enzymes in order to break down fat. All right, so I need you to get prepared. That food's coming down the pipeline. Okay. Frequently, what happens for people who have SIBO is that they are not producing enough stomach acid. Okay. And so that whole digestive process that is dependent on having stomach acid in place becomes compromised. Okay. This is frequently where we see people starting to suffer from acid reflux, for instance. And what's the first thing that people oftentimes take when they have acid reflux? They take a PPI. They take a medication that continues to lower their stomach acid. And it's exactly the opposite of what needs to happen in order to resolve that acid reflux. Acid reflux is one of the most common things that I see in my practice, and it is so, I won't say easy to fix, but it is relatively easy to fix without using a PPI. I've been very successful with that in my practice. So first thing with SIBO is that we really need to optimize stomach acid, okay? Because all of those downstream digestive processes are dependent on that first step. Right. Then food moves into the small intestines. The small intestines is our primary mode of absorbing nutrients from our food. So for people who have SIBO, what we end up starting to see here is that chicken they just ate for dinner, it's now residing in their small intestines, which is no longer a sterile environment, right? It's been inhabited by some of these species that aren't supposed to be there. So it's dysfunctional, okay? What ends up happening here for people who have SIBO is that they are deprived from the nutrients that they're eating in their food. And we can see deficiencies in some of these fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, K. And we can see deficiencies in iron and in vitamin Bs. These are really incredibly important vitamins for overall health, and they have a huge impact on hormonal health. So as that food now is in the small intestines, we have a number of different problems happening here. Not absorbing the nutrients from your food. Also in the small intestines, here's where the digestive process continues to happen, right? So we have pancreatic enzymes coming in. We have bile from the gallbladder coming in to help break down fat. Again, if that initial step has not been taken where that stomach acid has been released and to an optimum amount, the pancreas doesn't get that strong message that it needs to participate. The gallbladder doesn't get that strong message that it needs to participate. So what happens? We have undigested food hanging out in the small intestines. Undigested food ferments. It causes gases. Okay? It starts to go bad in the digestive system. One of the telltale issues with people who have SIBO, and it's one of the reasons why SIBO is reoccurring frequently for people who have it, is that their gut motility is so slow. What do I mean by that? Again, back to our example, we eat the chicken. That chicken needs to go through this digestive process at a good clip, okay? That chicken shouldn't still be hanging out in there 24 hours later, okay? I can promise you at that point that it's not as healthy as it once was, okay? So getting food to move through the digestive system in a reasonable time period is really key here for SIBO, okay? Because it helps to keep the digestive system healthy. It prevents the feeding, if you will, of these inflammatory species, okay, that are waiting for some of this fermentation to happen. Okay? And then finally now, we get into the crux of it. So that undigested food is now getting pushed from the small intestines into the colon. At a certain point, the digestive system just says, like, enough is enough. We need to get this out. Okay, we got more food coming down the pipeline now, right? It's 5, 6, 7, 8 hours later. And now you're eating breakfast. You had chicken for dinner, and now we're having breakfast. We're still trying to deal with this chicken. Okay, so eventually, the digestive system just continues to push that undigested food down, causing issues in the colon. And again, this is oftentimes where we see people getting diarrhea or constipation kind of chronically. Okay? So when you start to understand basic digestive function, and especially understand it from this lens of SIBO, you can start to appreciate here where if you don't have enough stomach acid, if you're deficient in pancreatic enzymes, if you're having trouble digesting fat because you're not making enough bile, any number of those things can compromise the functionality of the digestive system. Okay? And that ends up perpetuating the SIBO infection, even if you have addressed the inflammatory species that were causing some of those SIBO symptoms. All right. So this is the first reason why so often SIBO is reoccurring and SIBO protocols end up not working. Okay. Now, the second issue is food. So just following the FODMAP diet is not going to get the job done. Certainly, it will give you short-term relief, but it will not give you long-term relief. Once you bring those FODMAP foods back in, frequently symptoms return. So what's the solution? With every kind of gut issue, it's so important to develop a uniquely you protocol. And what I mean by that is that we're both getting a GI map test, so we're understanding exactly what's going on in your gut microbiome, but then we're also getting an MRT food sensitivity test. And what that MRT food sensitivity test tells us is how your immune system is reacting to the foods that you're eating. If you're having a really, really high reaction to dairy, that will get picked up on that test, and we can pull that out of your diet. And so this is a much more pinpointed way for us to identify exactly what foods are problematic for your system, okay? What types of foods are probably contributing to this overall digestive dysfunction pattern? What types of foods actually might be causing bloating and gas and constipation and diarrhea? Okay, it may not just be just the SIBO, right? There could be other food sensitivities that are causing that as well. So we need to understand that. Okay, so you can get a sense here of why just choosing a blanket diet like a FODMAP diet is not going to tell you what's going on with you. Okay, it's just too general. And then finally, changing the food on your plate is huge. So we've got that MRT, uniquely you approach. But then also we just need to look at, again, basic digestive function. What foods does the digestive system love? It loves vegetables. It loves meat. However, if you're not producing enough stomach acid, you won't be able to break down that meat. You may not even want to eat meat. I see this all the time. Okay. So we need to help give your body the support that it needs so that it can break down the food that you're eating. High fiber foods, and gluten-free high fiber foods are really, really key here. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of gluten tonight, but I will tell you that if you have SIBO, you should not be eating gluten. Okay, and the GI map is, again, a really nice resource for this because it can help us to understand how reactive you are to gluten. Okay, but I will also tell you that no matter how reactive or not reactive you are to gluten, you shouldn't be eating it if you have SIBO. Okay, it's just complicates the digestive process so much. Right. So let's kind of pull back for a moment and look at a few of the other peripheral components of SIBO, okay, other things that you really want to be aware of. So I mentioned PPIs, okay, proton pump inhibitors that reduce stomach acid production, really important to transition off of those. Now, please understand that if you decide to transition off your PPI, you need to be working with your medical professional, your doctor, to do that, and then a professional like myself who knows how to help people make that transition. Okay, this is not something you want to just do willy-nilly. Okay. Other considerations, antibiotics. Okay, if you've been on even one round of antibiotics, it can absolutely turn your gut health upside down. Okay. I have a protocol that I put all of my clients on when they've been on antibiotics, and it's very, very important to heal the gut directly after being on antibiotics. Otherwise, it can cause a lot of issues. Other medications, pain medications, can be really, really problematic for gut function, and specifically for gut motility, as I was talking about earlier. So again, we need that digestive process to follow a very good timeline. Okay, we don't want to have any delays in that poop making its way through. Okay, if we have delays, problems start. So unfortunately, pain medications can be really problematic for that. Okay. Other considerations. So what I specialize is helping people who what I specialize in is helping people who have hormonal imbalances really holistically resolve their hormone symptoms. And I go about that first and foremost via gut health. Okay. The relationship between gut health and hormone balance is well researched and documented, but it's rarely addressed that way in the medical world. Okay. And so let's talk about the relationship between hormones and SIBO. So one important correlation is the thyroid. For people who have hypothyroid, or maybe who aren't diagnosed with hypothyroidism, but they've got a sluggish thyroid. Okay, and I do blood chemistry work with my clients to kind of identify that. All right, if you're sort of on the edge of hypothyroid, that's an important thing to know, because hypothyroidism can cause sluggishness in the gut, which we know is a no-no for SIBO. Estrogen, this is a huge factor. And, for my male clients, 50% of my clientele are men. And so many men are struggling with low testosterone, and it just makes them feel miserable. And unfortunately, they're not getting the care and support that they need around this. And while a man might need testosterone, what we also need to look at are other factors, like, is his estrogen super high? Okay, so high levels of estrogen can also cause sluggish gut motility. Okay, so when we're looking at some of these root cause drivers of SIBO, you also really need to be looking at your hormones and what's going on with that. Okay, and interestingly enough, the GI map stool test that I use in my practice, it does have a marker on it to help us understand how well the gut is detoxing estrogen. And it's very, very helpful. Stress hormones. So there's a study in the Psychoneuroendocrinology journal that highlighted the impact of stress and cortisol on GI disorders, including SIBO. And so what we see here is that high stress drives cortisol levels up and also can lead to things like leaky gut. Okay, so if you have SIBO, please hear me when I say that there are a number of different things that need to come together here to help you recover from this. Okay, we need to figure out what inflammatory species are residing in your gut. We can't do just kind of a blanket random SIBO protocol for you and expect that to do the job. Okay, just doing a SIBO test versus doing a SIBO test and also getting a GI map test is a world of difference. Okay, so we can bring those antimicrobials in to address the markers on the GI map. We can bring in those functional supports to address the markers on the GI map, streamline digestive function so that, again, we're really addressing the SIBO at that root cause place. Bringing in that food sensitivity test versus relying on more of a blanket diet like the FODMAP diet. And then also addressing things like stress. Okay, stress can slow down gut motility an incredible amount. Okay, so bringing in those stress relieving practices meditation, journaling, just talking to somebody about how you're feeling makes a huge difference, helps the nervous system to settle down. And that in turn helps to improve gut motility. Okay, there's a reason why the nervous system is broken down into two sections. There's the sympathetic, which is the fight or flight state, which most of us are in way more than we should be, myself included. And then there's the parasympathetic state, which is your rest and digest state, right? Isn't that wild that that is the nickname for the parasympathetic nervous system state? That is our restful state. That is our digestion state. So the takeaway here, it's really difficult to have healthy digestion if you're super stressed out, if you're in that fight or flight state all the time. Okay, so again, when we're talking about what's missing from your SIBO protocol, why does that SIBO keep coming back? Stress relief is so important. And then finally, let's kind of wrap this up with just a couple more little tidbits. As I mentioned before, gluten. If you're eating gluten, stop it. Stop that right now. There are a lot of fantastic gluten-free options out there. Okay. And again, I didn't get down the rabbit hole on gluten tonight, but suffice to say that it really compromises digestive function for everybody, regardless of whether or not you have a sensitivity to gluten or have celiacs. Don't just rely on a SIBO test, okay? You also need to get a GI map stool test so that we really understand the full scope of what's going on with your GI. Don't rely on just a blanket diet like the FODMAP diet. We need to get you an MRT test so that we understand exactly what's going on with your food sensitivities. Okay. Let's look at what's going on with your hormones. Is there a hypothyroid component here? Is there a high estrogen component here? Both of which can slow down your gut function. What's happening with your stress? What's happening with your sleep? Okay. So it's really a whole person perspective that will not only help you in the short term to clear that SIBO, but it's really important to consider these factors for long-term maintenance. Okay, what supplements do you need to take long-term in order to support your digestive function? And it's a really, really important question. Right? All right. Thanks, y'all, for checking in with me, hanging out tonight, watching this show. If you want to get the show notes from tonight, happy to send those to you. We're going to turn this show into a blog, and I'm happy to send you that link. If you want to get in touch, please do. You can shoot me a DM, an email, and ask me your questions. And I'd love to hear from you. All right. I'll see y'all next time. Thank you.